refuge. I invite everyone to think that they dedicate this session to all sentient beings, and that they take refuge in the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the path, the Sangha as the community, and that from now until enlightenment is reached, they take refuge and engender the Bodhisattva attitude. So come to this conversation with that a pure mind. Well, I am looking at my book, and I'll tell you where I think we are in the book. I think that we are still at the beginning of the book. I think we're still in the initial chapters, and I have our location as being in the chapter 2. The problem is the solution. And we are at the chapter, or the subheading, mirror, mirror. Does anybody have any other location where we might be, or is that it?
That's it.
Okay, very wonderful. In fact, what's very interesting is that over on page 72, the previous section, it's really, really interesting, because he talks here about the 3 poisons and other mental and emotional habits are not in themselves the cause of suffering. Rather, suffering arises from attachment to attachment, aversion, and a bewilderment. And so then he talks about the Tibetan word zinpa, which means grasping. And so in a way, we've just been actually talking about that just through our little pre-conversation that we had before we turned on the recording. And so he starts the next section with a quotation from Jamgon Khantrul the Great, who wrote encyclopedias. He wrote 5 encyclopedias of Buddhism. And one of the texts that he wrote was The Torch of Certainty, which is a description of the Mahamudra lineage preliminaries called Nundro, as well as the main practice of Mahamudra. Those of you who have a copy of The Torch of Certainty, which was translated by Judith Hansen a number of years ago, that copy does not have the Mahamudra chapter in it. But the newer translation by Kempo David, that is called The Torch of True Meaning, does have the Mahamudra chapter in it at the end. So in that encyclopedic book, Jamgon Khantrul talks about Mahamudra, how to prepare to practice it, and how to practice it. And so when he's talking about the initial four reminders, which are the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward Dharma. These are contemplations that a person does at the beginning of one's Mahamudra path. One contemplates the preciousness of one's life, human life. One contemplates the impermanence of that life, karma, and the impact of karma on their life, and then the defects of samsara. All of these things are thought about and are reflected upon as a way of encouraging us to fuel our practice, to fuel our intention to practice the Dharma. And so the very one that he's quoting here, all living beings, the contents of this world are impermanent. And so then now Mingyur Rinpoche is going to talk a little more deeply on the topic of suffering. So he says the intensity of suffering caused by strong attachment to a set of beliefs or perceptions was vividly demonstrated to me through an encounter with an elderly woman who came to visit me in the United States. As soon as she sat down, she began crying. "It's okay," I told her. "When you've calmed down, you can tell me what's wrong." We waited a few moments, and finally she said, "I don't want to be old. When I look in the mirror, I see all these wrinkles and I hate them. I hate them so much. The other day I broke my mirror." So of course I had to go out and buy another one. But when I look in it, all I can see are the wrinkles, and it drives me crazy. I get so angry and so depressed, I don't know what to do. Mingyur Rinpoche said he hated to admit it, but he said he was a little surprised that this upset her so much. He said his own grandmother had a lot of wrinkles, but he thought they made her face all the more beautiful, so soft and so gentle, so full of wisdom, and always smiling. And so he couldn't say it directly, but he said, when someone is experiencing pain, probably the worst thing we can do is say something like, well, that's just your perception. Change your perception and your experience will change. Well, if one of my teachers had said something like that to me when I was bound up in my own anxiety and fear, he said, I don't think it would have made any sense to me. And I might have ended up feeling more alone and bewildered than I already felt. He said what he needed during his own struggles was an understanding that he was facing a dilemma that everyone faces. All living creatures, in one way or another, experience a profound and penetrating desire to survive, to live, and to flourish, and perhaps also experience some moments of peace. So I'm really happy that he shares this story, because we get surprised sometimes by our own reactions. Things that don't bother anybody else might bother us profoundly. And we may find that others don't feel sympathy or empathy for us because they've never experienced what we've experienced. And so we might struggle to find someone who really understands. And so, so then he talks about how his father and his teachers walked him through the process of this. They urged him to look at what he was experiencing and to comprehend through simply looking at the thoughts themselves, the emotions, and the sensations, and watch them come and go and see their impermanence. So in a way, he was talking about the impermanence of everything through the impermanence and the moving, like the moving clouds. You remember how, oh, one moment. Let's see here. I'm having problems with one of my peripherals here. Stand by. So we can make that happen. Okay, there we go. I had something that was bugging me, so I had to take care of it. Sorry about that. In other words, he was talking about how his teachers helped him to understand impermanence, and that impermanence helped him to understand his feelings. Pema Chodron likes to say that your mind is like the sky, everything else is just the weather. You know, your mind is like the sky, everything else is just the weather. These passing clouds of emotion may seem to be really, really difficult, and they may rain on us, but by the same token, they are moving. So in a way, that his Mingyur Rinpoche's teachers were asking him to look at the sky rather than look at the clouds, and to see that all things were passing. And so he said that the Buddha could have skipped the second noble truth altogether, going from the truth of suffering to the third, the truth of cessation. However, the explanation that the Buddha gave in the second noble truth was critical in helping us understand and face and work with things. Pema Chodron, if you remember, and I believe that it might have been in Start Where You Are, but it might have been in one of the other books. She said, if something hurts so much, it's because I'm holding on so tight. And this learning how to relinquish, this learning how to soften our grip, this is very important for us. And so he said, at the same time, the second noble truth emphasizes we're not alone, that many people are feeling what we are feeling right now. In the past, I've recounted the story of how a woman who was experiencing intense fear She had lost a child in pregnancy and was pregnant again. And she spoke to me and said, I'm trying to bring my Buddhist teachings to bear on this. She said, but I can't stop feeling the fear. I just can't stop feeling the fear. The only thing I could think of was to say, well, then what we're going to do right now is we're going to work with that feeling. We're just going to be with that feeling and work with that feeling. Let's just be with the fear and work with the fear. And so I asked her to think and to send her mind out, to think about all of the other women in the world at this moment, sitting at the edges of their beds in fear. And I said, imagine that you're opening your arms to them and you're putting your arms around all of them and gathering them to you and holding them as you would be held by them, and saying, we're with you, we're all in this together, we're all praying for you, we all want you to be well. And she said that little guided meditation was helpful to her in that moment. So what Mingyur Rinpoche is saying here is that by teaching the universality of suffering, the Buddha gave us an avenue for experiencing the suffering, not all in isolation by ourselves, but with others. And so anyhow, then he comes back to Mingyur Rinpoche on the next page, comes back to the story of the woman who was grieving the loss of her beauty. And he said, I began talking to the woman so pained by her wrinkles. I began to talk to her about impermanence and how it is the basic condition we all face. If we can accept it, then we can actually see that there are some benefits to the changes, overt and subtle benefits to the changes that we undergo throughout the course of our life. And so he said, when you fixate on what you were like and what you were capable of doing when you were young, you won't be able to see some of the advantages of growing old. Think about the things you can do now that you couldn't do when you were young. Think of the perspective your experience has brought you. You might also remember points in your life when you were young and you couldn't wait to be older and enjoy the opportunities of a wiser, more experienced and respected person that they enjoy. If you fixate only on the gross levels of change, you won't see the benefit of subtler changes. He said, when I was younger, I couldn't wait to get old. I'd be free to do what I want and be more stable. No one then could tell me what to do. A year later, he said, when he was passing through the US, she came for another visit. This time she was relaxed and smiling. And she was happy to report that she hadn't broken any mirrors since our last gathering. I realized after our talk, she explained, that time was not my enemy. Age was not my enemy. My own fixation was my enemy. When I looked in the mirror, all that I saw was what I thought other people were seeing. An old woman, unattractive and useless. And I started acting that way too. So of course people started treating me as old and useless. It became a vicious cycle. But when I started thinking about the experience I'd gained over the years, I actually started feeling a little proud of my wrinkles. Each one was like a badge of honor. A crisis survived, a test passed. I started looking at other people my age, thinking, well, we've all gone through a lot and there's more to come. Little changes and big ones. She says, I won't say I jump out of bed every morning looking forward to change. I'm a little old for jumping, she said. But I find myself paying more attention to my life, to the moment, because that is all I have, isn't it? The moment, this moment. And there's a lot more going on in this one moment than I ever thought. Wow, how about that? You know, the idea is all I have is this moment. That is such a profound thing, that it's all happening right now in this moment. And this is all we ever have, is this moment. That's what he's trying to express. And so what will we make of that moment? And I think that this is the power of the Bodhisattva motivation. It gives us purpose in every moment. Wishing to benefit other sentient beings is a way of being present with the goodness in every moment. And the more we can practice that wish to benefit beings, the more value we will see in the current moment. Yesterday, I visited a woman who survived a stroke. Now, she's not out of the woods yet, but she survived an extremely serious condition she could have died from. I visited her in the hospital, and she was completely unconcerned about the appearance of her partly shaved head and the whole business of being in the hospital. She was ready to get out of the hospital any day, anytime. Anytime she says, I can go. She said, I'm ready. But she also understood that she needed to be there in order to get well. And I told her about my friend Mike. He passed away a number of years ago, but he was in that same hospital on that same floor because of a stroke. And he was the fella who said to me, he said, I am holding the Bodhisattva motivation. So this means I am a blessing to every doctor and every nurse who contacts me. I am, my Bodhisattva motivation means that I can be a source of joy for everybody who sees me, just because I'm secretly working for their liberation. And I told her this story, and she was very pleased by it. I said, so I said, you can also bless them by visualizing that the medicine Buddha dissolves into all of your doctors, nurses, and medicines. She said, I've been doing that already. So if once we realize that we have the power to transform things, it is a powerful thing. It is a very powerful thing. And so what he says at the end of this section is that the essential lesson of the second noble truth is that acknowledging that all conditions are bound to change, we can approach each moment a little more clarity and a little more confidence, relaxing into it rather than resisting it or being overwhelmed by it. We don't have to be bossed around by our experiences. Neither do we have to fight or flee from them as enemies. We have the potential to look at our experience and recognize this is what is happening now at this moment. The next moment will bring another experience, and the moment after that will bring another. And so I remember that people said to me when I went into 3-year retreat, like, how could you possibly be divorced from your life for so long and be gone from the people you love for so long? How could you possibly do it? And it's so interesting because I remember going into my retreat room and saying, well, I'm going to be doing this for a while. For a while, I am going to be here. And later, I will not be here. And I will remember being here. So for some reason, I think I already had that idea in my mind that I'm just going to be here for a while. And then when that while is over, I'm going to be somewhere else. And then I will look back on this time. And it's so interesting. Somebody sent me an email this morning saying, congratulations on the anniversary of your graduation from 3-year retreat. I wasn't paying attention, but he was watching my Facebook. And apparently today is the day that I graduated from 3-year retreat. And I forgot about it, but he remembered it. So it was a real blessing to get that given back to me today by that fellow. So anyway, you just never know. So let's see. We have a little bit of time. I'm going to just push on into the next paragraph and the next section, and then we'll pause and see if there are any questions or discussion. The next section, he talks about conditions. And then, because previously, the previous section was about this grasping and clinging to situations. And now he's going to talk about the conditions around in which all of these things take place. He says attachment, he starts with a quotation from Paltro Rinpoche, the great Nyingma master, who said, even a tiny spark of fire can set alight a mountain of hay. So Mingyur Rinpoche says attachment to the three poisons of anger, attachment, and aversion, anger, attachment, and bewilderment can be considered the immediate cause of suffering, but the seed typically requires a combination of soil and water and light in which to grow. So those conditions, he says, these are the conditions that vary from individual to individual. Remember, I was talking about some things are karmic. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teaching. Right before we came on to the recording today, I spoke to you about Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teaching on karma, where he said not everything that happens to a person is because of their karma. Sometimes it's the coming together of sudden conditions, and that the conditions is impacting the conditions under which our karma comes to fruition is the purpose of prayer and the wearing of protection cords and amulets and the doing of pujas and whatnot. These are all meant to impact the conditions under which our karmic seeds take root and flourish, under which they blossom. And so frequently I use the story of a woman from my who married into my family, who had the terrible condition of having cancer, but the terrible karma to have cancer, but she instantly was in the condition of finding a doctor who was specialist in her kind of cancer, who was able to treat her so successfully that she was cancer-free for the rest of her life, even though she had a very, very serious cancer. And it was going to be very difficult to cure. She met exactly the right person in exactly the right place and exactly the right time, and she was cured and remained cancer-free for the rest of her life. So she had the karma to get sick, but then she also had the conditions to have all of these other things arise. And so, and then the next section, he says, and in this paragraph, he says, many of these conditions arise from specific personal experiences, the family environment in which we were raised, the influence of the cultures in which we live, as well as genetic factors that are only beginning now to be understood by experts in the field of biology and neuroscience. Such factors may be considered the soil, water, and sunlight of our individual lives. And so then, he talks about age again. He's saying that in many Asian cultures, signs of age are acknowledged to be tokens of respect, a widespread cultural acknowledgement of that long life confers some type of wisdom. And so then he said, even certain rotund people who are sometimes criticized in some cultures. In India, for example, he said they're considered to be a sign of success and health when a person is round. Yet among many people he's met in Western cultures, these same physical characteristics are also considered signs of ill health. And so I think we're going to stop here for now, because he begins after that to talk about the life of the Buddha, who was born into a higher caste of people, the warrior caste, and then the assumptions that people made about him. And that in spite of all of that, he ran away from home and became a wandering holy man. So we'll talk a little bit more about these examples the next time through. And so we'll continue with the discussion of conditions, and then a little bit more about how our karma comes to fruition. So questions, curiosity, discussion. Yes, if you have a question, because I'm spotlighted, I may not be able to see you, so you can just unmute and ask. And if there's a traffic jam, I'll help.
Well, my question is very, very mundane, because I have not, I didn't know that we were doing this, and I wasn't able to join, but I'm wondering if I have the right book. It says that Joyful Wisdom, Mingyur Rinpoche with Eric Swanson.
Yes.
I see. But you've been reading, and I cannot find what you're reading. Is it the same
I'm
book?
so sorry. This is
No.
It's in chapter 2. It's in
chapter 2. I wonder if my book is different because it's paperback. I can't.
It very well could be. It could very well could be.
It could be. Okay.
Anybody else have the same experience?
Thank you. Thank you, Lama Kathy.
It is in chapter 2. I hope that helps. We're getting some feedback, so some people may need to we're getting some audio feedback. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have a question? It sounds like there are no questions. Okay. Well, then that means we get a chance to meditate. So we'll sit for just a minute or two and quietly practice some meditation, and think that, and we can either reflect on the reading or just observe the breath and cultivate a presence in the present moment. So we'll do that. I don't know if you can hear it when I ring the bell, but let's see. You can place your body in the posture of meditation, straight spine, shoulders down, chin tucked in, eyes cast downward. Begin with one deep breath. Breathe out, and then follow the breath coming in and going out. And we'll sit for just a few minutes. Okay. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Really appreciate you all being here this evening. And you can make a note that we're finishing chapter 2. Next time we'll we'll finish up in chapter 2, and then we've got let's see. After that, we'll start on chapter 4. I said chapter 2, so it looks like we're in chapter 3 at the moment. My bad. And that we'll pick up at the end of chapter 3, and then pick up with chapter 4 next time. You can make notes as you read through the book. You can make underlines and ask and put question marks, and then we can talk a little bit about the parts of the book that you have questions on, and so forth and so on. So anyhow, so thanks again for being part of this. We'll dedicate our merit this evening to all sentient beings, particularly those who are feeling some loss and some difficulty at the moment. We'll pray for all sentient beings in general, but these beings in particular. And we'll dedicate all of this merit to their relief of suffering and their becoming Buddhas. Here's the short prayer. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thanks, everyone.
You, Lama Kathy.
You're the best.
Thank you.
Everybody except Lama Kathy